So, once again, I'm Jimmy Lamb, Manager of Education for Sawgrass, and I'm speaking here today on the behalf of Joto. Our topic is pricing and cost analysis for sublimation. Okay, so pricing begins with understanding of your operational cost. I mean, a lot of times people come through and say, hey, what would you sell this for? Well, that doesn't work, okay? It's a function of, first of all, you got to know what it costs to produce something before you can even begin to think about your selling price. Now, once you know all that information, then actually the hard part begins, and that is figuring out what it's worth to your client. Okay, your margins, there is no magic formula for margins. Your margins are really based on perception of value. So how well you can market your items will really determine just how much margin you can put in there. I find that most people undercharge, okay, and that is fear factors, fear of charging too much, fear of not getting the order, whatever else, all right? But the reality is you really have to know your customer and the market so that you start to understand their needs. And if you can fill their needs with your products, that makes your products worth more money. And when they're worth more money, you can charge more for them. I mean, think about the things you buy in your own life, okay? When something is really important, you're more willing to pay a higher price to get that, okay? Just a simple example is UPS or FedEx shipping. If you need it overnight, you're going to pay a lot of money. But if you need it overnight, you will pay that money because you needed it. If you don't need it till next week, you're not going to pay overnight shipping. You're going to wait and go with a lower cost. So a lot of these things apply here as well. What is a need that you are fulfilling for your customer? So if it's an important need, it's worth more money. When you talk about personalization, for example, personalization is a little different because that's where you're really tying into emotional experiences, and that can also drive up the cost. So as we go through today, we're really going to focus on what I call cost analysis more than anything else, because those are the things we can actually put into formulas and kind of work through. And that's also, when you understand costs, you can start working on bringing down those costs, because if you can bring down your cost, you don't need to bring down your price. The idea is if you can bring down costs, you make more money, okay? I've seen people, oh, well, if we can produce it cheaper, we'll sell it cheaper. That's not the goal, okay? All right, keep that in mind. Now, digital printing cost, okay? Anything we do with digital printing, we're doing with the printer, we got inks, we got papers, all that kind of stuff, right? So sublimation is just a form of digital printing. So most people would say, when you ask, what is your biggest cost, they'd say they're ink. And that's interesting. And I know why, okay? Remember, I've been in this business, okay? I've done many different types of decoration. And I understand that if you go to buy, let's say, 4 cartridges of ink all at the same time, that's several $100s, and bam, that really gets your attention, okay? So certainly you look at it and say, wow, I spent a lot of money in ink. That costs a whole lot of money. The reality is, taking a look at ink is saying, well, what does it really cost to spread it across something, to apply it? And we use a simple rule of thumb for sublimation of a penny per square inch. It's actually less if you bought one of the Virtuoso printers. It's less than that. But it's easy math to say a penny per square inch instead of 0.75 of a penny, or stuff like that. So it's not that expensive, but it is when you're buying it in a bulk situation. So I understand that concept. But the reality, when you start looking at it, if you had an 8-inch by 10-inch image at a penny per square inch, and remember, it's actually less, that's 80 cents. If you were putting that on a t-shirt, and you could actually do it for half that, let's say your price, half-priced ink or something, it's 50 cents. That doesn't really affect your margin very much, okay? That's my point. The reality, when you start learning and you start growing your business, you'll find what the things are that cost money, okay? And you're going to see that as we go. And those are neat things because of the fact that we can actually control them. So keep that in mind as we go. So let's look at some examples here. As I was saying, the ink always looks to be, because if you look down at your spreadsheets, if you're keeping spreadsheets on your business or QuickBooks or whatever, you're looking at what that expenditure is rather than the application cost. So you really want to look deeper to understand how it all works, okay? Because you have many other things going on. You have media, which is paper, of course. You've got different supplies, consumable supplies that you use up. You have a tremendous amount of admin cost, and people forget that, okay? And by the way, all this goes into your pricing, because successful pricing strategy pays for all the cost of production. The cost of production is more than just ink and paper, okay, or labor. The cost of production, it also involves everything running your business, okay? All your supplies, your admin, all those things are really behind the cost of production. A lot of times people try to say, oh, how much ink do I use? How much paper do I use? That's my cost. No, you're a long way from what your true costs were. So there's a lot of things going in there that we have to think about routinely. Here's some of your typical operational costs. And you start down this list, and you can see there's a lot of things here. Okay. Now paychecks, if you're, just starting out, you're working in a garage, whatever, you don't think about paychecks. You're hoping you can pay your bills, right? But you always got to think bigger. That's one of the things with a new business startup. Think bigger, okay? And I don't mean 20 employees or something. You may not ever have employees, but I'm saying think about paying yourself, okay? Think about giving yourself a regular paycheck. Think about your business is driving in enough revenue to pay yourself a regular paycheck. Well, now you're an expense because you're actually the most important expense. So as you look down the list, I'm not going to read everything here because you can see it on your screen. There's a lot of different things going on out there that are part of your cost of operation. And you've got to recoup all your cost of operation in every job that you do or every price that you give. Therefore, you have to know what they all are. This isn't something that you wait till tax time to try and figure out. You need to know this on a daily basis. All right. The biggest expense is time. And I know if you're just starting out, you're working for yourself, you can put in 100 hours. A lot of you probably cannot, because I know a lot of people start just like I did, started out working a so-called real job and then starting your business on the side. And that's kind of scary too, because a lot of times you still put 60 hours a week or so into your business on top of your regular job. A lot of work, right? So in the beginning, most of us work really hard and make very little because we're trying to, start up a business. But the reality is your time has a value on it. Whether you're earning enough money to pay yourself or not, it still has a value, and it still has a cost in the long run. And when you're building a pricing strategy, your strategy has to assume you're actually going to pay yourself, okay? So you do have to, take that into consideration when you're putting things together, okay? And you're also going to find out that your number one cost is time. And I know time seems like it's not cost, like it's free, but it's not free, okay? Especially if you do get to the point where you have employees. But time is huge, and from day one, you need to actually put a value on your time, so at least on paper, you understand what it's costing to do something, because ultimately you want to pay yourself, okay? And margins will make sure that you can pay yourself. But if, for example, if you figure your cost of operation without paying you, then you know what? You probably won't ever get paid. So that's why it's important to put a value on your time and work it into your cost of operation, so that your cost to produce something reflects you getting paid. And then the margin on top of that means more money, okay? But what it really means is, because when you look at sales are cyclic, up, down, up, down. Sometimes you have too much work, sometimes you have none. So part of, having good margins means that when you are making money, hopefully you're making enough money so that in the down times you can keep things running. So, you got to think about all that too. There's a lot that goes into running a business, okay? And if all you had to do was learn how to sublimate. All right, let's say we were using, actually, I did this on the SG3110. I really need to update it to the SG400. But let's say that we're using the Ricoh SG3110 with Sublimate R ink. Great printer. A lot of people have that printer and a great ink set as well. So let's say we're using that, and we're going to do that image right there in an 8-inch by 10-inch on a Poly Performance T, okay? And all right, so let's say for purposes of discussion, easy math, your cost of operation is $30 per hour. That's 50 cents a minute. You see why I chose it. Everything that you do can ultimately be converted into time. And that really makes it a more effective way to figure out what things cost, okay, than trying to pull out a calculator and figuring it down to the penny level. All right, so let's just say for assumption here, just for simple assumption, we're just trying to keep this really simple here, right? Let's say your print speed was 1 minute for that image. It's actually less. Let's say your pressing time was 1 minute. And it is. Okay. Actually, if you're putting on a shirt, it's less. Typically on a shirt, you're about 35 to 40 seconds. So it's a little bit less. So the reality is printing and pressing is a little bit less than that. But just for simple math, at 50 cents a minute, that comes out to $1. Okay. Now, I didn't include any, setup time and all that. We're going to get into that, okay, a little bit further as we go. I'm just talking about pure printing right there on there, here with the print speed and press speed, okay? So my production costs $1 in this example. Now we start looking at things like setup time. Well, let's say it took 5 minutes to set the job up. Maybe you had to do artwork. Maybe you had to do some editing. I don't know. At 50 cents a minute, that setup time costs you $2.50. And now we press the shirt. Once you take the shirt off, we got to pull the transfer paper off. We actually have to let it cool. Don't start folding it up while it's hot, and definitely don't stack it with other shirts while it's hot. So it's actually got to cool down. Let's just say we just did one shirt. So we're going to pull it off. We got to cool it down. Maybe we have a little work order we got to make some notes on, and now we fold it and maybe put it into a box, for the customer, and we're done. And let's say that took 5 minutes. Okay, that was also at 50 cents a minute, and that totaled out to now $6. It cost me $6 to make this. It cost me $1 in production time, but it cost me $6 with all that downtime. Now, my ink cost for that is actually 42 cents. See, because I told you it was less than a penny per square inch. It was actually 42 cents we calculated out on that job. And the piece of paper that was used was 20 cents. So my paper and ink was 62 cents. My production cost was $1, so it was $1.62, right? But it was actually $6.62 because of all the downtime that went with it. So the reality is downtime costs you money, okay? And downtime can actually cost you a lot of money. As I said in the very beginning, you're just trying to get some jobs out the door, and get some things done. But in the long run, you really have to start thinking about this. And that's why you want to think about that from your pricing strategy right from, the get-go. So in the reality in this example is the ink costs were 7% of the production costs, not including the shirt, okay? That's just how low it was. So what I'm saying is I know you targeted in on the ink cost because you're writing a check for it, okay? That makes perfect sense. You're looking at that. You're aware of that. You're making sure, that you're being smart about how you're spending your money. But the reality is, in the long term, you got to think about all this time, all the downtime that goes with it, because it does cost you money. All right, so let's talk a little bit about managing production costs, and we're going to get to our spreadsheet here in just a few minutes. You need to identify your cost factors and focus on the ones that you can control. So that's always important, is figuring out what is going on and what can you control versus what can you not control. These are some of your cost factors on a per job basis, really from lowest to highest. Ink and paper, production time, and substrate procurement costs, okay? Remember, substrates have a pretty high impact on what you're doing, and you also have to pay shipping and all those other things in there too. So we want to think about these. So these are things that we can certainly control, trying to be more efficient with how we do things. So let's take a quick look here at some things that we can do to manage costs. When you start, a lot of times we wait and we buy the substrates when the customer orders. Makes sense, okay? I don't have a problem with that. But over time, you start to notice that maybe you sell a lot of coffee mugs. And if you can stick with the same brand of coffee mug and you're selling it routinely, you will get a better price if you buy in bulk quantity, and then it's sitting on the shelf and you can turn your jobs faster too. So that's one of the things you start looking at is what is going into my jobs, what am I selling the most of? Can I go out and buy that on sale, put it on the shelf, and then work out of that inventory? So some things you probably would inventory, you'll save some money, other things you wouldn't, okay? Simple as that. By the same token, when you look at shipping, your shipping rate goes down on larger items. I mean, you have like a baseline shipping for a small order, but then as the weight of it or the size of the order gets larger, the shipping per piece starts to drop dramatically. And again, if you're able to buy in bulk in certain situations, you can definitely save some money in that on a given job type of basis. Okay, so those are a couple of things that we can do as well. When we were talking about ink and paper, how efficient are you at putting multiple jobs on a single sheet of paper or multiple images on a single sheet of paper? If you're running coasters, for example, you can put 6 coasters on a 8.5 by 14 sheet of paper in general. Okay, so you're getting better use out of that particular paper, but don't get too crazy with that. I've watched people, they try to figure out how many things they can put on a sheet of paper, and they spend 15 minutes trying to figure it out, and the sheet of paper only costs 20 cents. Well, that didn't make sense. Okay, so we don't want to do that. All right, so keep focused on that, and then always look at your efficiency by reducing your downtime. Okay, how can you reduce your downtime? When with sublimation, when the heat press is closed and there's something in it, you're making money. When it's open and there's nothing in it, you're not making money as far as production. Okay, so you want to keep that thing closed and actually pressing as much as you possibly can. Now, certainly if you don't have enough sales, it doesn't really matter. But let's assume that now we're to a point where we're getting enough sales. Now we got to be really efficient in what we do so that we can turn it faster and make decent money on it. All right, so that's when we start talking about maximizing your run times, and I'm just going to show you a couple of simple things here before we jump into our spreadsheet, okay? Because the spreadsheet really opens your eyes to a lot of things. Okay, as your jobs come in, start breaking them down. We have a tendency, let's say that we have 4 people order stuff. We have a tendency to do each job completely before we go to the next one, okay? And that could make sense, but a lot of times it does not, because if we have a job that's got multiple substrates of different thicknesses or different types, that means that we spend time with our heat press resetting the pressure for different thicknesses, and in some cases resetting temperatures as well. If you go to apparel, normally on apparel we're going with about 385 instead of 400 degrees. So you're going to have to adjust and wait for it to either cool down or heat up. You got to adjust your pressure again. So the idea is to take a look at all the jobs coming in as a whole and then try to break them into sub-jobs. And I do a breakdown where I look at thickness, for example. I like to do, all my thin stuff and all my thick stuff, okay? Then I look at material. I like to do my metals together and my acrylics together and my, woods together, that type of thing. And then I'll start looking at size as well, because remember, I can get multiple cell phone covers under the heat press at the same time. They don't even have to be from the same order, okay? But I can do that because of their size. I can even mix together some types of cell phone covers with some coasters because they're the same material, as long as they're the same thickness, okay, so that I get the right pressure. So, that's something to look at too. And that can get kind of confusing. So let me show you just how simple we try to make it. As much technology as we have out there, in my day-to-day world, I've worked very hard at keeping it sometimes non-tech, okay? Let's look here at those example I'm talking about. Maybe we have 3 clients, okay? Client A, B, and C. And you can see client A's order, B's order, C's order, okay? And you see it's a mixture of some different things. So if I take those 3 and run them as individual orders complete, beginning to end of each order, I guarantee it's going to take me longer than if I do it the way that you see out at the bottom, where I've taken it now and I realize that between those 3 orders, there's 18 iPhone covers, there's 12 metal license plates, there's 18 wooden plaques, there's 6 mouse pads, and there's 24 t-shirts. So I'm going to try and set this up now where I run it based on substrate rather than on the person. Now, how do I keep all that straight while I'm doing it? What we do is we'll take that very first invoice, which is maybe, we'll call it the master invoice for the client. And then we look at all the different items that are on the invoice. In this case, maybe there's 5 different items that this particular company has put in an order for, okay? So now we just make 5 copies of it. Wow. Okay, so maybe 1 copy's the t-shirts, 1's the license plates, 1's the iPhone covers, whatever. You understand what I'm saying? So I got 5 different copies. Now, the neat thing here is having 5 different copies, and then we just highlight what the, sub-job aspect of it is that still it's a tie-in back to the original order because it's got the client's name on it, right? So then we physically separate the pieces out. And we use laundry baskets. And the reason we chose laundry baskets is because you can see through them. When you got these types of baskets, you can see through them. So now I can actually take maybe all of mugs from this client and put them in one basket and tape the order to it. And that way I'm tracking what's in that basket, where it's going. And then maybe I have all the phone covers in the next one, all the license plates in the next one, the mugs, mouse pads, etc. okay, like that. Now, we have big industrial shelves where we put the things on, and they're all hanging so you can actually see it. But I mean, you know what? It makes sense. It's easy to work with. When laundry baskets are empty, what do you do with them? They stack very neatly out of the way. I don't like working with boxes. They're all different sizes. You can't see inside of them. There's not, you keep boxes for shipping purposes, but the reality is that's not the way to actually schedule your work. Okay, so that's exactly what I do. I mean, that was very low tech. But now what I'm doing is I'm separating out all the pieces of each job by substrate, but then I go put it on the shelf by substrate. So I have one end of the shelf is, where all the license plates are going to be. Okay, so now we got multiple baskets full of license plates for, multiple customers. So that's kind of how we did it. And then we do it all, and then we regroup everything back together. I mean, once all the license plates for this customer, they come out of that basket, they're being pressed, they're put back into that basket when they're done. You still got the work order on there to tell you where it goes so that you can mate it all back up later. Now, once you really kind of get your operation up and running, you got a lot of orders coming in, if you learn to do something like this, it all becomes second nature, and you're just automatically doing it. I started as an embroiderer, and I learned real quick that when you're switching an embroidery machine from flats to caps, it's a lot of work. Depending on the size of the machine, it can take a long time. Also rethreading threads and all that stuff. And we learned very quickly that, we actually have certain days of the week we do caps or headwear because of the change to the machinery, So, you may be a person that says, hey, we only do apparel on Wednesdays, and that way you gear up everything because apparel is kind of unique. Okay, but a lot of different things are unique, so just keep that in mind. Okay, all this, where does that do with pricing? Okay, but it's all part of pricing and cost analysis, because if we're able to maintain efficient production, then we can actually turn stuff around in a logical way, keep the cost down so we have better margins. Okay, so everything comes back down to how efficient are you in your operation. Okay, that's important. Okay, building a cost-based pricing system. Now we're going to switch over and take a look at a spreadsheet. So give me 1 second here while I switch from PowerPoint over to my spreadsheet. Okay, so we're looking at the spreadsheet here. I will put my email address back up at the end so that you can email me, and I'll be glad to send you a copy of this sheet that we're going to work with. Okay, so this is going to put everything into really good perspective of what I've been kind of talking about here. And this is in Microsoft Excel. It's an older version of Excel, so it should work, with a lot of different versions out there. It's up to you to change it to fit your situation. This is basically put together in a training format. Notice all the numbers are round, okay? So the very first aspect of the sheet is what I call my cost analysis for a small shop. And what I want to do is try to figure out what does it cost to run your business over, say, the course of 1 year. Now, I've put everything into a yearly format. I do have a column here for monthly. Technically, you probably add a column for quarterly. You may have some stuff that's bi-monthly or whatever. I don't know, okay? It's totally up to you of what you got going there, okay? But you want to get it into a yearly format. That's where I'm headed here. Now, I'm talking about different types of charges here, and that's where you'll see the F and the V. The F is fixed, meaning it pretty much stays the same. And the V is a variable cost, which means that it can change, from month to month or whatever else. So I put this together, total fictitious business. Total estimated annual operational cost is $58,800. Okay, now that might scare you, right? What's the highest cost right here? $42,000. I put in my owner's draw paycheck of $3,500 a month, which is $42,000 a year. So you are the most expensive part of your business, So the reality is, if you don't pay yourself, let's put 0 in there. Your overhead's about $16,800. but you need to pay yourself because that's the whole reason you're in business. Now, just because you put a paycheck in doesn't mean you'll get it, okay? Because you're only going to get it if you have enough sales to generate enough dollars to make it all happen, okay? So I cannot promise you the sales, the margins, or anything else. All we can do is work numbers to say this is what we need to be able to, keep our business running, okay? This is what's going to cost us. That's what we're trying to do here. All right. By the way, everything in blue is numbers that you'll put in yourself. The ones in green are calculated for you. There's lots of formulas hidden in here. So now we're going to take this down. If we say our estimated cost is $58,800 to run the business for 1 year, provided nothing changed, and stuff does. That's why you have a spreadsheet. Because as you build a spreadsheet, you'll make it more and more detailed. You'll be adding a whole lot more expenses in here. You'll be tracking it much closer. You'll be looking at, what it all works out to. You'll be realizing that, a lot of your variables change a lot. You'll notice as your business is growing, some of your fixed costs may grow with it too. So there's change all the time. This does not stay there, okay? All right, so now we have to look down and say, how does that factor out to an hourly cost of operations? How do you get there? Okay. Well, the first thing you want to look is how many weeks are you going to work out of the year? And I have 48 weeks in here because that's assuming 2 weeks of vacation and 10 business holidays. Okay. So that means that your weekly cost of operations, the math done for you in a spreadsheet, is $12.25. If it's a 5-day work week, that's $245 per day. If you're working 8-hour work day, that's $30.63 per hour. Okay. So I don't know what you're working. And also, don't put what you're really working, put what you want to work, okay? Because if you're working like 12 hours a day and you put this in here, it'll calculate it based on 12 hours a day, but that means you always have to work 12 hours a day to be able to maintain that hourly cost, okay? Because it was spread over 12 hours. If you only want to work 2 hours a day, it's a good bit more money, right? So, you be the boss of what you want to put in there, okay? And then remember, this is also projecting long range. I mean, right now, this might be a part-time thing, but you really want to start thinking about building your prices based on a full-time, because if it's part-time, some people maybe will just stay part-time forever, but a lot of people look at this as, I want to transition out of some form of employment into this as full-time, or maybe, unfortunately, you have a job situation that is getting ready to end, and you're looking to build a business to replace that. Either way, you need to be looking at, what are you looking at in the long term? Where do you want to go, and go ahead and factor it in, because this is just pricing. It doesn't make you work something. It doesn't guarantee you anything. It's just to help you figure out what it costs, okay? Now, we're going to take a look at what does it cost to actually produce something. So I have what I call here pieces per cycle. And for me, it's a print press cycle. I print it, I press it, okay? So if it's one, something's big, it means I can do one at a time. If it's one thing and it took me 2 minutes to print and press, how many minutes can I work out of the hour? Guarantee you cannot work 60 minutes. You'd be lucky to do 50. You're probably closer at 45 to 40. So in this example, I'm using 50. When we get deeper into the next sheet or the next page of this spreadsheet, I will show you a different approach of taking that into consideration. Okay, so right now I'm saying you're going to work 50 minutes. So you have 50 minutes out of the hour. Each item took 2 minutes. Then in theory, you could do up to 25 pieces in 1 hour of whatever it was, okay? And I didn't talk about how much ink was used. I didn't talk about how much paper. Because you're going to see all that is actually covered over here on consumables, okay? So we're not looking at a job cost of ink and paper on a per job basis. We're looking at how much are we consuming per month. Remember, you're doing samples, you got mess ups too, fun things like that. All right, so what you find here is on an item where you can do one per cycle, and you took 2 minutes and you had 50 minutes an hour, you had 25 pieces in 1 hour, it costs you $1.23. It costs you $1.23. How do you know it costs you $1.23? Because you have a cost of operation per hour that takes into account all of your overhead, all fed down to that cost per hour. So that's why we start saying time gives you a really good gauge of cost. The more pieces you can do per minute or per hour or whatnot, the cheaper each piece will be, because your hourly cost stays fixed until you have a lot of expense change. Okay, so as long as your expenses are staying pretty much the same, your hourly cost is staying fixed, the more pieces per hour you can produce against that hourly cost, the cheaper each one becomes. Very simple concept, okay? Try to keep it simple here. Now, the next page here is the cost of complete job. I'm making it a little bit more detailed because I'm taking into account more of the variables, which I haven't done so far. So this is where you really got to go out and figure out things in the real world. What is your average print press time? Okay, printing and pressing. I got 1.5 minutes here because last time I ran this was something on small and it was taking about 13 seconds to actually print something and then a minute in the heat press, okay? Then I also have what I call substrate swap time, and think of it this way, is when you take it one thing off the heat press, you have to put another thing on, okay? You also may be looking at all of that too, is I have to mate up the substrate to the paper. In some cases that's really fast, in some cases it's not. So part of this is not just every job fits the same mold. You're going to see in a minute, I'm going to tell you that you run these numbers for every different substrate that you work with, because every substrate that you work with has different characteristics that are going to affect these cost and efficiency factors, okay? So let's just say, for sake of argument here, and you put in the numbers that apply to you, that's 2 minutes combined for those things. And let's say that right now I'm working on something that's larger, so I'm getting one, piece per print cycle. Now let's say I have 12 pieces. Let's say my job is 12 pieces of whatever it is. I don't even care what it is right now. Let's say that we had an estimated setup and pre-production time of 15 minutes, which is kind of extreme. Maybe it's a lot of artwork. By the way, if it's that long, you should be charging an art charge. But I'm just putting in there for the example here. And let's say on the back side of this is 12 pieces. I'm going to spend 15 minutes of post-production of processing and closing out the job order, and then walking away from it and going into the next thing. So you can see that I have 12 pieces, and it takes me 15 minutes to set up, 15 minutes of downtime backside. So I got 30 minutes of downtime for 12 pieces in this example. Kind of scary when you think about it. Okay, so math is being done for you because it's green. So our calculated production time for printing and pressing is 2 minutes. Unexpected downtime percentage. I mean, just things happen, right? Maybe it's a lot greater than 10% for you, okay? So if you, feel like in any given hour, 10% of that hour is unexpected downtime, put it in there, okay? So, like I said, I have it in a percentage here. So that came out to 2.2 minutes being the average for one cycle of printing and pressing, okay? If that's the case, I could get 27.3 runs per hour. I love that, 27.3 runs per hour. This particular job, it was one piece per cycle, so I'm going to get 27.3 pieces in 1 hour. The reality, it's only 12 pieces in the job, so it's going to take me 26.4 minutes to do those 12 pieces, provided nothing, blows up in your face, right? 26.4 minutes. But the total time to produce it was 0.9 hours. Why did it take so long to produce it? It only took 26.4 to print and press, but it took pretty much an hour to do it because of this setup and post-production time, okay? If your hourly cost of operation is $30.63 per hour, then it really costs you at 0.9 hours, $28.79 to do it, okay? That's what the job cost was. That runs out to $2.40 per piece that it costs you to do it. You didn't have to figure out ink costs, paper costs, or anything else. It costs you $2.40 per piece to do it. Simple as that, okay? If that item costs you $3 to buy, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was a low-cost T-shirt, and you had to pay shipping to get it to you. Remember the shipping part, right? So if you ship 12 shirts and the shipping was $9.95, in this case, it's dividing $9.95 against 12 shirts, meaning each shirt actually costs you $3.83, okay, when you include all that. So your total cost per piece is $6.23. And that's shirt and the production cost here if it indeed was a shirt. And then if I had a markup of, say, 150%, your selling price is $15.57. Now, where did I get 150%? I made it up. Who am I selling it to? Is this a personalized product? Is this a mass-produced product for an event? Is this, as you can see, it's just 12 pieces, actually. Maybe it's, a small business, uniforms or something. A lot of who I'm selling it to and the marketplace that I'm in will help determine what that markup actually is. And a lot of these poly performance shirts, you can certainly get more than $15.57 per shirt. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. Okay, so let's go back and look at this and say, well, maybe some of this looks inaccurate for my situation. That's why you play with this, why you time yourself. This is why you look at it. I mean, maybe we can get our setup and our post-production time down to 5 minutes, okay? That drops the production cost per piece down to $1.55. It was $2.40. Okay, so it's possible that I can shave off some time there. I'm not going to shave any time right here. In reality, this might be closer to 3 minutes. You find out working with shirts. So yeah, that's more my realistic, printing and pressing. I'm still keeping my post and pre-production time down, but now I bumped it back up to about 2:39. Okay, so it's up to you to kind of work through it and really look at the particulars of any given job. And like I say, you would run this for every different product. When you start figuring out how to put together a pricing catalog or something, you want to look at your coasters. How long does it take you to do? If I'm doing ceramics, remember most ceramics take longer to do than 1 minute as far as your pressing time. Okay, you look at your setup. I mean, with a shirt, you do have to do an initial setup where you're setting up the press with the foam, all the right pressures. You got different temperatures. You have to use a lint roller on it. I mean, you got a lot of different things. So every different product that you sell, you want to kind of run your numbers to figure out how long does it really take, and then also take a look at it in the realm of multiple pieces. Okay. Now, the reality of multiple pieces. Okay. The reality is you want as much true production time as you have before you have the downtime of turning to another job. So, if you're talking about when I was just showing you that 15 minutes of setup and 15 minutes on the post end, if you ran one piece, if you had to set up 15 minutes and then, finish the back end at 15 minutes for one piece, that's going to kill you on cost, okay? Now, if you had 100 pieces and it was still 15 minutes to set up and 15 minutes on the backside, because you have such a long run of production, your cost per piece goes down, okay? And you can see it in this final page here that I'm going to show you, because this is where we start looking at quantities, and this is also what you would use to actually start making quantity discounts to people as well, okay? And what I've done here is I'm still taking all the information we just looked at, but I've got multiple columns with different quantities. Now, these quantities, they can be based on how you like to sell. They could be based on the quantities you're buying from your manufacturer or whatever. This is never something you show to the customer. This is the calculator for you to start figuring out, what you're going to charge for stuff. And so you'll take whatever the item is and you're going to run all those numbers. All these numbers I was telling you about, you're going to go figure out. I mean, this is ceramic mugs. Let's figure it out. A mug's 3 to 5 minutes. That changes that part real fast. Now, quantities are important because there's a big difference between 1 and 6 pieces in efficiency of time, and having a quantity of 1 to 6 pieces may actually be shooting yourself in the foot. You might have a quantity of 1 to 3 and then 4 to 6 and then 7 to 12, or maybe 7 to 9 and 10 to 12. I mean, it's like once you get to 12 pieces, you start really getting better run times, but in those really small quantities, it can be quite challenging. So you want to keep that in mind. You put the quantities you want up here. For my purposes, running it on quantities, if you look at the quantity up top where it's like 1 to 6, you see right here it says 3. I chose the center point. I based my mathematical calculations off the center point of each quantity that's listed up there, okay? So all this stuff is what we were just looking at. You're figuring out your estimated setup and pre-production times based on the substrate that you're working with, and your post times as well, okay? And then you're going to work all the way down through here. A couple other things I've added in here that you didn't see before. Actually, just one thing, credit card percentages. If people pay you with credit cards, you have to cough up a percentage to the credit card company. So reality becomes you need to figure out what that maximum amount is and probably plug it in. And I plug it into every price, okay? My pricing includes somebody paying with a credit card. If they're paying cash, you can give a discount or just keep the money. It's totally up to you. Your markups, again, you're choosing what it is. That's the hardest part. All that math is easy. A markup's hard because the markup is sort of emotional. It's tied to the marketplace. It's tied to the perceived value. And you got to think about things too. When you're putting together, you may not be a graphic artist, but how can you make things look really good to help keep the perceived value up? And I'll tell you a simple trick, and that is full bleed, okay? Always having a background sometimes maybe it's not possible, but I always try to have a background from edge to edge of any given substrate. And that's what we call full bleed. So if you have a true full bleed, it makes the substrate look nicer. I don't like all that white area, just little tricks like that. So you got to keep the perceived value up so you can help drive up these different margins. So you got to work through that part. The margins are based on how well you can market. It really is, because it's based on perceived value on the part of the customer. Whew. Okay, so that is the spreadsheet. Let me give you right here my email address while we're looking at the screen. And you can email me there, and I'll be glad to send you a copy of that particular spreadsheet. Okay, so that wraps up what I have to present here to you today. And if you have questions, now's a great time to ask those questions.